Hello and welcome to the subject prepare documentation for planning and building approval. Whilst I say the subject, it's actually a cluster of subjects you'll be doing because there are some efficiencies gained in bringing these subjects together. Some of you may have chosen to take on only the planning approval at this point in time. Others of you will be taking on both planning approval and building approval, and in that process ticking off another 4 subjects. These four subjects are based around primarily office management type roles, such as storing information and bringing in digital information into drawings and setting up BIM capable software, that sort of thing. So I'm your lecturer Michael Jenkins, and I'll be taking you through this subject or cluster of subjects. Please beware, it will be it is a very fast-paced subject. There is a lot to get through. You're required to do a lot, but on the flip side, you'll be learning a lot, and you'll be equipped with many of the tools that you're required to possess when you do this work professionally. So, if you're seeing this video, then you will have received a Learn Key from me already, either via an email or you've come into one of my early classes and you've used that Learn Key and you've got into this Learn site. I'll just take you for a quick run through the Learn site and in the time introduce the subject. We'll give a brief introduction to the subject, but you'll get a far more in-depth introduction to this subject in my week 1 lecture. So the contents of the page for the Learn page is all included down the left-hand side here. This should, this concept should not be new to many of you. I understand that this is one of the latter subjects that you're doing. It pulls together all of the work that you've been doing in semester 1 or previous semesters. If this is the first subject you're doing, well then we've got a problem and we need to talk. But you'll find this subject's pulling together much of that what you've learnt already in your other subjects, such as materials and methods, your Revit classes, compliance, etc. So you'll be using Revit primarily for work within this subject, and it relies upon a decent foundational knowledge of the materials and methods and also building compliance. So on our Learn page, so we've got the welcome here, and that'll be where you're watching this video. So I'll put this video up onto this Learn page once I've recorded it. Then there's a bit of information here under before you start. So please, week 1, have a look through all this. The most important thing on this page will be your learning program. So it is a program that we do have to stick to fairly well because there is a great deal of work to get through. I'm trying to think off the top of my head how many assessments there are. There's something like about 42 assessments to complete within planning approval. Now that sounds very, very daunting, and it is a big subject. But some of those assessments, you'll find you can work through those quite quickly, and you can piggyback off work you've already done. So in terms of writing letters, basically what I'll encourage you to do is write a letter template and use that template for producing further letters as you go on, etc. So you'll find some efficiencies throughout, and you'll be able to tick off those tasks fairly quickly. But what does need to happen is things happen in a sequential fashion. You do one thing before you do another thing, and we need to work through that sequential fashion in a very well ordered manner to enable us to get through everything in the semester. So that learning program is going to be your Bible for the next 18 weeks. So if you're going to print off anything from this page, I suggest you print off that learning program. So there are learning programs for both planning approval and for building approval. If you're doing planning approval only, obviously print off the planning approval. If you're doing both, print off both. You'll see in the building approval learning program that the program actually starts a couple of weeks later. That's because with this sequential fashion for doing these approvals, you have to get some things done with your planning approval first, and you have to achieve planning approval before you go into producing all of the documentation which is required for building approval. The reason for that is, and you do this at times in practice as well, is that you don't know that you're going to get planning approval specifically as you wish. There may have to be some concessions with the council which flow on to how things are done within building approval. So in some instances, you don't want to be working away on that building approval and that documentation, then have to make substantive changes as a result of changes in the planning approval process. So planning approval starts a little bit earlier than building approval, but finishes a little bit earlier than building approval as well. One of the ramifications of this is that the students who are studying planning approval only get a little bit of an easier ride for the last 3 weeks of the semester. There's a little bit more flexibility in that. And on the flip side, those who are doing both planning and building approval, you'll find that things will really ramp up in that fourth week in, and unfortunately it'll be quite a sprint to the finish, but of course you'll be completing your studies much sooner. So those learning programs, very important to be printing off. Below that, there are the documents that set out the national framework for how this subject should be run, how it should be assessed, etc. What we have to cover, why we have to cover those things. Also, you're probably very familiar with it by now, but extension requests. Also, I definitely hope you're very familiar with it. Accessing the National Construction Code, also referred to as the Building Code of Australia, and then accessing Australian standards. If you don't already have your National Construction Code login and haven't already accessed Australian standards, then we might also need to talk about that. Very important that you have those foundational skills in building compliance before sinking your teeth into this subject. So that's the important bits. So read through that in your own time. Work your way through that. Look, by all means, you can skip the unit of competency, reading those if you wish. That's not compulsory. That's more my job to ensure that everything is taught and assessed as required. But if you like to have that background, then by all means, it's there for you to read. Then, following on from that, within our Learn page, we've got industry standards and instructions. This is also very important for you to read through in week one. We'll just acquaint yourself with everything that's here. Now, I've set this out in a fashion that flows relatively sequentially for how you'll need to refer to various different sections throughout the semester. But please have a good look through this in your first week to acquaint yourself with everything that's here, because some of the aspects in here will relate to things early on as well. So have a look at the thing in its entirety. One of those examples is I've put in here Guide to Development Assessment. Basically, what is development assessment? And the Residential Code fact sheet. So you may be asking yourself, what is a residential code? So have a look at all of these things and acquaint yourself with the South Australian planning portal. So I've got a link here, development application form and other useful resources. That's the SA Planning portal there. Whilst I'm on that, this is something which is undergoing a great deal of change. So we've got the biggest change happening to the planning laws South Australia has ever seen. It's really quite a revolution. That is in its it's just started on its implementation phase. Within this subject, we've got to be teaching what is our current approach for several reasons. One is that, the main one is we don't know how the new Planning and Development Code is actually going to be enacted, how that's going to be put into practice. It's one of those things that, yes, while there's an overriding framework, it hasn't been put into practice yet, and many of the finer details are still missing from the information required to implement all of that. So the main thing is I can't really teach it because nobody really understands exactly how it will be implemented just yet. But the other reason is that it's important for you to get that foundational knowledge of our planning system as it currently exists, because that's the basis from which the new planning system that's going to be implemented is going to be based as well. So it's very important that you understand planning and the planning processes today, because that gives that background to understand the new planning development code. So we'll cover that a little bit, and we'll be discussing that a little bit more as it unfolds through the semester, because there'll be a lot of information coming out, or there should be a lot of information coming out about that new planning development code throughout this next 6 months as we run up to implementation of that. But for now, have a look at the South Australian Planning Portal. There's plenty of information on there, excellent information. Got some useful tools and links. So Location SA Map Viewer, excellent resource. I really enjoy using that. So have a look at that. Work your way through here. So plenty of really good information, not just for completing this subject, but hopefully things that you're going to keep for your own practice following on from this. Then after industry standards and instruction, we've got product information. So once again, I've put things in a bit of an order, like project 1, project 2, project 3, and you'll notice that I've got titles such as project 1 specific. So these things, external cladding prime line is for project 1. But then down the bottom there'll be sort of non-project specific. So things such as information on windows and external claddings and internal linings and steelwork, etc. So all of these things that might relate to project 1 or project 2 or project 3. So there's a bunch of non-project specific product information. All that. Now you can most definitely do your own product research as well, and use products that you are very interested in. I don't have an issue with that, but we'll have to have that discussion. Now, whilst we're on that topic of discussion, so for internal students, throughout the semester you'll have, for planning approval only, you'll have 12 consults with me. So for each project there are 4 consults that have to happen. In one instance I'll be the client, in another instance I'll be the building designer, in another instance I'll be the council, and then the building designer again. So you'll be going through all these consultations where you have to I guess essentially discuss finer aspects of the project and gain information and confirmation of aspects from each of those separate actors. With building approval, or those doing planning and building approval, well, with building approval you've got an additional consult for each project as well. So for building approval you'll be doing approximately 15 consults throughout this semester. So the internal students, you'll be doing those within class time. For external students, we'll be Skyping. So set up a Skype account. I'll send you an email to get that information, and I'll arrange to be Skyping with you on a very regular basis. Typically, I'll set up a day and a time each week to do that. So 16 weeks of course divided by 15 consults is roughly 1 consult each week. And some weeks will be busier than others, but there'll be plenty of that for external students, plenty of that Skype contact going on throughout the semester as well. So it's a good opportunity for us to discuss various aspects and issues that you have as well. So we can be doing those consults, but then also having discussion about certain things, such as if you want to be using other emerging products and building techniques and things like that. Discuss that with me before launching into that. Then you'll see that the Learn page is broken up into Project 1, Project 2 and Project 3 planning. So just like you would have done in compliance or materials and methods, you've got 3 separate projects, and these projects should be getting pretty familiar to you by this point in time. I won't go into those specifically. We'll go into those within the classes, but I'll click on one, and you'll see that there's various different important resources for that project, but then all of your tasks outlined for completing that project, for getting it through that planning approval phase. So Project 1 planning, 2 and 3 planning, and then Project 1, 2 and 3 for building. So the same projects, you'll be doing planning approval documentation and then building approval documentation. Then, as I mentioned before, these subjects are clustered together with a range of other office admin type subjects. So store and retrieve information, set up BIM capable software, import and transpose information. So throughout your process of doing these, you'll find that the planning approval and building approval are incredibly heavy subjects. You'll be doing a whole lot of filing and communication and importing things, etc. throughout those the completion of those projects. But rest assured that in the process of doing all that for planning and building approval, you're ticking off all the assessment requirements you have for these and learning about those processes through putting them into practice. So to complete these ones, there are some assessments to be done, but basically those assessments are just collation of evidence to show that you've done various different bits and pieces throughout your planning and building approval studies. Then beneath that, of course, we've got our submission section. So you'll become very familiar with that because there are a lot of assessments. You'll be submitting through there on a very regular basis. Then finally, we've got a section here for recordings. That's their they're non-semester specific recordings. So that's information that carries on semester to semester. But I'll also be recording various different workshops and producing recordings throughout the semester and placing them into here, recording semester 1 2020, and I've left the link up here for recordings semester 2 2019. It's important for you to understand that the assessments haven't changed substantively since semester 2 2019, and much of the process for carrying out these for carrying out this subject haven't changed substantively. So you can, if you wish to jump ahead or get an idea of things, have a look at these semester 2 2019 recordings. Otherwise, just keep following semester 1 2020 as they become uploaded. Now, because this subject is it's very heavy on actually producing documentation and workshopping and doing consultations, there are not a huge number of recordings, and recordings will not be updated on a weekly basis. They'll just be updated when I hold specific presentations within the class. So particularly for external students, you'll be made aware of when these recordings come through, but just keep an eye on that. Maybe subscribe to the YouTube channel and get those notifications whenever anything new comes up. So that's the subject in a nutshell. We'll be going through each of these aspects in far more detail, week 1, week 2, and until then, enjoy the Learn page, get to know the Learn page, and I wish you all the best for this semester. Thank you.